So not everyone is fortunate enough to gain experience in foreign markets or with multinationals. And this afternoon, we have the opportunity to have a conversation with leading CHROs who have been there and done that, and who can share with us their wisdom and experience from an international perspective. My name is Anneke Andrews, and it is my pleasure to introduce Christian Schaub, Group CHRO from Alexander Forbes, Malisha Awunor, HR Director BHBW, and Pamela Xaba, HR Director Sub-Saharan Africa for Ford Motor Company. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Christian, I think it would be good if we start with you and we ask you to tell us about your international experience.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. And as you can probably tell from my first few words out of my mouth, I am currently having an international experience. So I have been very, very lucky to be a guest worker in a beautiful, beautiful country for the past 13 months. I learn something new every day. I have been continuously impressed by the quality and the kindness of the people of South Africa, and in particular of Alexander Forbes. And I am honored to be here today to tell you a little bit about what I've learned and what I am still learning.
Great. Malisha, do you want to tell us about some of the interesting experiences you've had with your international
Sure. So I've
exposure?
been in HR for 23 years. 17 years of that was spent in the mining industry with a multinational miner, and that's where I got my experience. I've been incredibly blessed. At the age of 26, I started traveling for them. And over a period of 5 years, I spent a lot of time both in Chile and in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And I think initially there's a sense of shock that here you're this youngster, an HR youngster at that, so you're not a mining engineer or a rock engineer, and you've got to go and integrate a new project into an environment that's completely foreign to you. And I think for me, the biggest learning is you have to immerse yourself in the culture that you're going to. It's important for you to understand what their non-negotiables are, because an integration project essentially is one where you take your company model from a culture perspective and go and acquire a whole lot of minds and copy and paste it. So copy and paste really doesn't work, especially when it's an international environment. But I find that being humble, having some sense of language. I mean, Mandela said, if you speak to a man in his language, you speak to his heart. And even if it's just to greet in Spanish, the amount of buy-in and commitment you get into who you are as an individual is phenomenal. And I think there's also the other side to it, in that you're an ambassador as well, because you're going there representing your country. And it's important to never lose sight of that.
That's so true. Pamela, any interesting stories or fun experiences you've had in your international travels? I can imagine there have been many.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I'd just like to first ask the audience, if I'm allowed to,
Sure.
I'm sure most of us in this room have either traveled or have lived overseas or want to travel, maybe just by a show of hands.
Who's worked overseas?
Yeah. So
Who would like to? Ooh, sorry, Pam.
Would like, yes, of course, we all want to. So I think for me, it was a humbling experience. So I work for Ford Motor Company. It is a global organization, as you know. I joined Ford 6 years ago. So in total, I've got about 15 years of HR working experience. I've always been in HR. I don't know anything else. I joined Ford 6 years ago, as I've mentioned, and 2 years ago, actually in 2015, I got an opportunity to work in the Middle East. So we operate in the Middle East Africa region at Ford as part of Sub-Saharan Africa. So I went to live in the Middle East. It was quite exciting, but I had my own preconceived ideas and my own stereotypes about the Arabic lifestyle. I thought, oh my gosh, do I have to wear the abaya now? Do I have to cover my face? And all of those things. But you get also very excited. But those are some of the stereotypes that you have to deal with and overcome. But when I actually got there, I was pleasantly surprised. So I was based in Dubai for 2 years, and I was supporting the MENA region, which is the Middle East, North Africa region. And under that umbrella, it was really the UAE, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia, it was so foreign to me because, I thought this African girl going into this Arabic, region, really not knowing much about either their labor laws or their way of life in general. But we all know that Dubai is now an international hub. It's such a cosmopolitan city. So, but it really did take me out of my comfort zone in a sense that, I became, from being a part of the majority in Africa or in South Africa, and then I became the minority in the Middle East. And I worked with people who did not look or even sound like me. And I had to really be very aware in terms of why am I there, what is it that I want to accomplish, get over my fears, my own, things that make me uncomfortable as a person, but also learning about the culture, you mentioned that, and also understanding the way of life, and be open to learning, because at the end of the day, it's the journey, right? It's that we're all on a journey of learning and understanding other people's cultures, and never lose sight of who are you as a person. So it taught me a lot about self-awareness and a lot about being patient with myself and others as well, and also accommodating others, not to prejudge people because of how they look and how they sound, whether they can or cannot do certain things. And also that life is not about just black and white, There's so much culture and diversity out there. So it teaches you a lot about that, and it humbles you as a person. And it teaches you a lot about empathy as well, to put yourself in another person's shoes and not judge them as an individual in terms of how they look and how they sound. So those are some of the lessons that I really took away, and which I continue to, apply in my journey of life, because like I said, we're all on a journey. Yeah. And we're all on a learning path. You can never say that you know everything, but you become grateful for the opportunities that you are given along the way, and you use them to inspire others along the journey.
And I think international working abroad provides you with such an opportunity to learn about new people and new cultures. Christian, what has been some of the things that's helped you to get a bit more of a local perspective?
Braaiing has been a big one. No, in all seriousness, I think building off of what Pamela and Malisha have said, the single most important thing is, first and foremost, to be open to the experience and open to learning. If I thought I had all the answers and knew everything when I got on the plane and moved to Johannesburg, I would have even more problems than I have today. So I think it is critical that you go into an experience with the attitude that it will change you. But that requires you to be open to those external factors, which will be people, it will be environmental, it will be language. And you've got to connect with people, not just in the office. You've got to see a country. You've got to learn about its history. You've got to you've got to learn what people like to eat and what they enjoy. Because I think Malisha, you said the way to someone's heart is by speaking their language. Yes, and if you can deliver food with that language, it will land even better, I promise. I also think, it's really critical not to put too much pressure on yourself or rush yourself. To be completely honest, the day before I moved to South Africa, I had a freak out. I was sitting at home and I just sort of came to this realization of, you're about to move 8,000 miles, I think that's something like 14,000 kilometers away, and you don't know what this experience will mean for you. You don't know who you'll interact with, how they'll treat you, how you'll be regarded. I'd been to South Africa before, thankfully I'm not that brave, but it also is an opportunity for you to expand your comfort zone. So today, this is you and this is the world around you. No matter what happens when you change and go somewhere else, whether you love it, whether you hate it, you will be a better, more interesting person for that experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, if I may, what do you think is the perspectives of the outside world of South Africans, from your perspective?
So, to be honest, I think that, and painting in broad strokes, South Africa in the outside world doesn't always have the best reputation. You know, you have a wonderful legacy with Nelson Mandela. You have a beautiful country for everyone who's ever met a South African. It doesn't matter how old they are, what color they are, where they're from. They are, you know, humorous and kind people. But often, you know, the news cycle doesn't go to those things. It goes to crime, it goes to corruption, and you know, thankfully, knock on wood, that has not been my experience here. And so, you know, whether I go back to the US or someone else tomorrow or in 10 years, I will have a different story of South Africa to tell. And it is largely because of the people that I've met here and, you know, according to my introduction, also the kindness that they've showed me.
Very good. I think what would be interesting for the audience is to know, how did it come about that you went overseas, or what tips would you give to aspiring young HR professionals who wish to see the globe and who wish to work in other countries?
From my perspective, may or may not know, embrace it. If you get given that opportunity, go and Google the hell out of it afterwards to figure out what it is you meant to do, but embrace it, because the things that you learn can only enrich yourself, and not just from a knowledge perspective, but spiritually as well. You get to see a completely different environment. I mean, we think we're a diverse country, and we think, but Chileans are all, you know, white people. You cannot believe the intricacies that exist within these countries. And exposing yourself to it, one, makes me feel even prouder to be South African, but also to be able to speak to someone and learn. Guys, if you're not willing to learn, I think that'll be the biggest hamper to your career. You have to be willing to learn. And I think with a history like ours, we often see differences as a liability. That is what we were taught. If something is different, it's not to be near, you don't go near it. But if you can start looking at differences as an asset, and how do you optimize against it or capitalize against it, you would be amazed at what you can achieve.
I mean, just to add on to that, I think being curious is key also, because you really need to be curious. You really need to know what's outside of, you know, what I'm currently doing today. And also just raise your hand and be willing to do more. You know, go and do those things that others don't want to do, because it's exactly those things that are going to get you out there, and people are really going to notice in terms of your capabilities, in terms of your strengths, and be, you know, so aware of yourself that you will not always know everything. You will not always have all of the answers, but get yourself a mentor. Surround yourself with people that you can learn from. You know, you mentioned something about learning. Be teachable. Be willing to learn. Be willing to, you know, to be vulnerable, actually, because that's what it is. You know, most people don't want to put themselves out there because we're always afraid that what is the next person going to say, or I will come across as if I don't know what I'm talking about, type of thing. It's okay not to know, because otherwise, how are you going to learn? So if you go then and do all of those things that others do not want to do, then it sort of puts you in a spotlight, and people actually notice that you've got a curious mind, and whenever opportunities come about, then you are the first on the list for those opportunities. You know, it's not a raffle that we just pick a name and you say, okay, this person, you need to go to New York or you need to go to Brazil. It's really, you know, the work that you put in that get you noticed at the end of the day.
Yeah. And how do you go about when you're in a new country, building credibility, building networks, getting a good local perspective to make a true difference in the new country that you went to?
So I think it's critical to know that you don't have the answers on day one, but others do. So you all will probably be amused to know that on my first day, I kept hearing about this person. And I didn't know who they were, but I knew they were someone I needed to know. I now know that the CCMA is not a person. However, thankfully, I have team members who I think, you know, within the first day or two noticed that something wasn't firing in my brain right, and they educated me. I wish I'd thought to ask them myself and not make the assumption, day one. So that's the most important thing, is know that you don't know everything, but that there are people out there, you know, in your host country, let's say, who want to help you because they know that they can learn from you too. And so it's really important, it's a two-way sharing of information, that it's the cultivation of a mutually beneficial professional and personal relationship. It's not all me, but it's also not all you.
From your perspective, Pamela, when operating in a foreign country, what have you found the benefit that South Africans can bring to the table? What do you believe we have to share and to offer?
That's a very good question, in all fairness, because at the end of the day, as South Africans, we put ourselves down. You know, we've got so much to be proud of as South Africans. So when you go overseas, you only think that, I'm only there to learn. But then you're also there to teach people about your country, about your culture, about where you come from, about your people, and about all of these nice things that we don't see in the media about Africa in general. Like you alluded to it, Christian, that we see crime, we see corruption on international media, but there are those things that, internationally other people do not see. So go and actually brag about those things, because we actually have a beautiful country. We've got a lot of young, beautiful, bright minds in our country. We've got a rich culture in terms of our heritage. So teach people about those things and not just blend in, and become, that I'm here to learn, so therefore I've got no voice. It got to a point where at some stage I was so proud of going to the Dubai Mall and wearing my Zulu beads because I did not see them anywhere, and I literally missed home so much. I would put on my Zulu beads and anything that's colorful that reminds me of home, and the reaction that you get, because mostly in the Middle East, they all look the same. Women in general, they wear their abaya and they cover their heads. So when they see you being so colorful, they actually ask you, where did you, get all of these things? So the next time you visit, you go home, you actually bring those things for them and you actually give it to them. So you actually then build strong, solid relationships in terms of making friends. Even if after you've left the host country, coming back to your home country, you still keep those relationships going. Till this day, I still have friends in the Middle East that any time that I want to visit that part of the world, I know that I've got family there. Yeah, so do not blend in.
That's such good advice. What were some of the more interesting questions you were asked operating in a foreign country?
I think my first one was, how long had I been living in South Africa? Because I was Indian, so they couldn't understand how is this Indian person a South African? And I'd never been to India, so it was. But therein, guys, keep your sense of humor as well.
Yeah.
Because in having that sense of humor, you actually get to learn more about each other as well. So I actually ended up having to do more investigation into my history coming back, because people were interested. I have always been South African. I didn't know what the history was. So it allowed me to do some self-reflection as well, which was an interesting journey.
So the most interesting experience for me as an American abroad right now is that delicate dance that people play when they first meet you to find out what you think of President Trump. Just to cut to the chase, there's a reason I'm in South Africa right now and not back in the U.S.
Very interesting. Any other words of wisdom, tips for aspiring young professionals? And Christian, another thing I have to ask you is, when you return one day, what will you tell people about South Africa?
Well, I will answer the question, but I don't want to think that far ahead quite yet, because I love it here. And what I will tell people about South Africa is, you've got to go visit. If you have an opportunity to work there, seize it, because you will learn a tremendous amount. You will meet smart, impressive people who are doing great things and overcoming, a history that has not been easy. And you will have a fantastic experience.
Very good. Any other tips, comments?
I think for me it's more, we are the ambassadors both for our country and overseas. And that resilience of the South African spirit can never be underestimated. It is remarkable. And the more I travel, every time that plane lands, I'm grateful to be back home. Open your heart, because the bonding that you do with individuals is broader than just the business. Make yourself vulnerable, as you said. 9 times out of 10, people want to help you. But I think we often think 9 times out of 10 people actually want to see you fail. That's not true. Being vulnerable and being open is the best way to learn.
And I think people are naturally curious.
Yeah,
You know, so it's
absolutely.
wonderful. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I really support what you're saying, is that what I experience is that in South Africa, we tend to question each other's motives. You know, so if a person asks you a question, you wonder, why are they asking me that? Is it because I look like that or I sound like that, you know? But at the end of the day, it's nothing to do, it's got nothing to do with that. Be curious and, you know, ask questions, because how else are you going to know or learn if you do not ask questions? And, you know, and also for the young up-and-coming HR professionals as well, you're not on your own. You know, find a mentor. You know, it's not even about only international experience per se, but, you know, get a mentor, be clear about what your goals are, where you're going, what is it that you want to achieve in the next. It's probably a typically cliche HR question, like, where are you going to be in the next 5 years? But it's so true. You know, there's a reason we ask those type of questions, because we want to find out, are young people really thinking about their future? Are you thinking, where are you going to be in the next 12 months? If you don't know how to get there, find someone who will help you along the journey, right? Who will help you navigate the corporate environment, you know, so that you build the confidence. If you sit around the boardroom or around the table, have the confidence to speak up and be okay that I will not know everything. And it's okay to maybe perhaps look stupid, but at least you are learning something. Yeah.
And if I may just add, you know, I think it's very important, particularly early in your career, if you want to have an international experience, it has to be something that you work towards. So it's not necessarily going to happen overnight, or just because you want it, or just because you're working at a company that has an operation abroad. So in my own experience, I spent about 13 years with a global company based in the US, where my initial focus was doing my job in New York well, and in a way that led to me getting more and more responsibilities. And eventually the organization wanted to take a chance on me and invest in me, because it is an investment, you know, and it is an easier experience usually to have if you're working for a multinational company where, you know, you can be moved between operations with the kind of long-term goal of building you as a future leader of that company. So, you know, international experiences are absolutely worth it. And if you even have a glimmer of interest, I encourage you to seek it out. But it takes work, not just to be in one, but also to get to one.
Absolutely, and even more so to then make the most of it when you do get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I begin to know what your view is of what does the future of HR look like? With your international perspective and from having traveled, if you had a crystal ball and you could look into the future, what would you say, what does HR look like in the future? And along with that, what's some of the advice you would give young professionals to look out for, to consider, to think about in terms of their careers and the future of the organizations they are in?
I think with increasing globalization, I mean, the world has become so small. You know, we also have to consider the changes in technology that we have today. I think the earlier session that was here, they actually touched on that. And it's very important that with the changing world of work, that one is very clear about not stagnating in their roles. What are the opportunities, you know, that you see in your own organization? So when things change, when you introduce new systems in the organization, what are you doing to equip yourself so that you are ready for that next role, so that you are ready for whatever changes that come? Because it's very important. We all know that the role of HR is changing. It's not only about just, you know, pushing paper and signing forms and opening files, you know. How do we position ourselves to become the true strategic HR partner for the business. And it really comes to understanding your core business, so that you don't sit in your office as an HR business partner and expect the business to come to you. You must go to the business, be curious about what happens in operations, what happens at the strategic level, talk the language, understand, go and mingle with people who actually understand the core business. That way you can stay relevant in your field. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Totally agree with you, Pamela.
Yeah.
I think transactional HR is something that's going to be completely off the table. The way you keep yourself relevant is to be agile. And guys, two things. One, understanding the core of your business. If it means you're putting on an overall and going underground, you go and you do it, because you have to understand that. That's what allows you to deliver value. And the second thing is understand business. I think often as HR people, we get so stuck in doing IR and doing disciplinaries, you forget that we need to learn how to read an income statement and a balance sheet. Those are the things that are critical skills to have to be able to earn your place at the table, and more importantly, have a business perspective rather than, oh, here's the warm and fuzzy person coming to talk to us about HR. It's about hard business, and you can still be a fair, effective HR professional through the stuff that you mentioned,
Absolutely.
having that business understanding and understanding financials, and being agile.
I completely agree with all of those sentiments, and building off of that, the world is changing at a rapid pace. The role of technology can't be understated. Different expectations around the speed of how information moves, how people are involved in decisions, and all of these things have a tremendous impact on businesses and on individuals. And I think it's an incredibly important responsibility, opportunity, challenge, however you want to look at it, for HR to help businesses and individuals cope, and ideally do more than cope, thrive in this rapidly changing, incredibly exciting, at times scary and frightening, but ultimately beautiful planet that we all share.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to ask the three of you, it's all good and well to get an opportunity, but how do you sell it to your significant other? What did your support system say when you say you want to go 14,000 kilometers away, when you said you're going to an Arab country with no alcohol, no church? What did they say? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to steal this one and go first. I had it easy because I didn't have anyone else to bring along. So I only had to say goodbye to my parents, and I think they were happy to, see me go.
I think for me, my first 3 years were easy. I then started traveling. My son was 4 months old. I started traveling when he was 5 months old. So that support structure at home is very important. It's understanding what your non-negotiables are. And more importantly, don't be shy to let people know that I can go for 1 week and no more. Be very clear around what those things are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Support structure is very important. I think in my case, it's quite a unique one. I've got 2 daughters. One is 20. So when I left for the Middle East in 2015, she just started university. So she stayed at school, and I got married a month before I relocated to the Middle East. Wow. So I had to really sit down with my partner, my husband, and bless his soul, I love him to bits, because he really sacrificed a lot for my career and for me to be where I am. He actually put his own career on hold, his businesses on hold, to actually relocate with me to the Middle East for the 2 years. And that takes a lot out of a man, an African man for that matter, to actually understand that we just got married in barely a month, and then now you want to pack up bags and go, and then what happens? But I had to take that leap of faith to move my career forward, to move my life forward. Not only myself, but my family as well. And we came back with a child. She's now 2 years old. But it just goes to show that, the support system is very important. And then if you have really, I'm not sure what the comment is, but it would be interesting to hear that. So I spent a lot of time indoors. I came back with a baby.
Hi. Okay, my first question, I have 2. My first question is for you, Christian. With regards to the South African labor relations and South African labor law, it's very intricate, very complex, very complicated compared to the other countries or, globally. I just want to know how quickly it was for you to kind of get into the groove of things, to understand our big friend CCMA, and how quickly it was for you to get into the swing of things on how we do our labor, and how did people around you, your subordinates, how did they, react to the fact that you're still learning and some things come easy for us, but for you it's like, whoa, you can't fire a person just like that? Okay. And the second question I have is, I just want to know, how did you guys, it's for all three of you, how did you deal with resistance coming into a new country? I mean, I'm a Black African woman, very, very young, and for most of us here in the HR industry, we're literally helping to run the company. And it's South Africa, you understand South Africa, you understand the cultures in South Africa, it's easier. But in a totally different and foreign place where you are receiving resistance, not only from the people that you're working for, but maybe from the people that are supposed to be responding to you or to be reporting to you. How do you deal with things like that? And yeah, it's 3 questions. The third one, the third one is, except for Mom Pamela, because she moved everybody on the other side. How do you deal with loneliness? It does sometimes strike you where you realize that, oh my gosh, I'm alone. How do you deal with that? What do you do? What things do you do just to make sure that at the end of the day, Monday, you go back to work and you're still that same person that people can go to and speak to? Thank you. I want to move. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Great questions. I'll answer what I can remember, and then I'll ask for some help. So, in answer to your first question, I'm still learning, and so I think there are a few topics where my team knows that I need their support and their expertise, and South African labor law is certainly one of them. So I do not rush to decisions. I make sure I do my homework, that I speak with experts both in the company and outside to be grounded in my thinking. I will say, thankfully, I did have some work experiences in the United Kingdom, in France, in Germany, some locations that also have a different approach to employment law and employee rights than our freewheeling U.S. businesses. I know another question was around managing loneliness. So you can't move to another country unless you're excited about the opportunity. If you're not excited about it, loneliness is a hard thing because you will be giving up the familiar, you will be taking a hiatus from the friendships and relationships and support structure that you have in place. So you've got to go with the right mindset, which is, I know, I will at times be lonely, but I'm willing to be lonely because I'm going to have all sorts of other sort of things that spark my interest. Meeting new people, seeing new places, doing new things. And that helps put it all in perspective. I also think, air travel, FaceTime, and other kind of Skype technological innovations have made the world a much smaller place. So, today when I'm lonely and I can't find a member of my team or one of my friends to vent to, I'm able to pick up the phone and, see my best friend, see my mom, see my goddaughter. Mm-hmm. And that really, that gives you the spring in your step to be fine, at least till the next day.
Very good.
Your question around resistance, I think it's very important to have a one-on-one with the person that you have a sense that resistance is coming from, and to, look the person in the eye and get to understand what is driving it. I often find, even with the unions, when you put it in or your frame of reference is you work for your family, I work for my family. We have very different agendas we need to achieve. How do we do this together? You get a very different response versus I'm here to do a job and you're not going to get in my way. So understanding the source of the resistance will allow you to better manage it. Because sometimes that resistance is around fear, or insecurity, and people may just need a little bit more TLC than someone else for you to take the next step. But understand what the source of it is.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think that question on resistance is such a good question because it's really, resistance is mainly driven by assumptions. People, we assume things about each other and not really sit down and actually, put it on the table what it is that we are assuming, or just ask the question. It also boils down to being curious. Go and find out what the real story is. But also, it's very important that, you also forgive people, because forgiveness becomes a big part of it, because if you cannot forgive people, you cannot forgive yourself. It means that you cannot move forward, So forgive yourself, forgive people, and don't worry so much about the things that you cannot control, because the only person that you can control really is yourself. You cannot control what others do around you, say about you or not about you. It's okay, but as long as, this is where self-awareness comes in, as long as you are clear about what are you there to learn or teach others, and what it is that you're going to do once you're back in your home country. Even if you don't get, to travel, people will always assume things about you anyway. We do that every day, either at home, even at work. So this is why then forgiveness becomes, a very key factor of any relationship, of any situation.
Very good. There were two more. There were questions there, and then we'll get to you first. Was she first? Okay. Can we have a mic, please?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick question to Christian. If you can just share from your experience, and I'm hoping going to be brutally honest, in as far as having had, you're an international person, you're from a first world country, and you're now operating in South Africa. In as far as the quality of HR service offering, how would you compare to your previous experience? Because you're now currently on international assignment.
So, to be honest, the primary difference that I have noticed between an HR operation in, let's say the United States versus one here is the role of technology. So in many cases, it was 10 or 15 years ago in the US that a wave of process optimization, automation, all of that happened. And so the more transactional elements of HR, for example, going from an employment application to creating an offer letter, that could be done with the flick of a few buttons. And so that meant that people tended to spend more time, not always on the right things, but on different things. And so I do think, that the use of technology in South Africa, in the HR field, has not yet, there is still ground to cover. And I think that will then enable all of us to spend more time on skills that we also have that I think are at least as developed, if not more developed, than in some other countries. And that's, emotional intelligence. That's connecting a business strategy to people outcomes. That's being, ears and eyes of what's working in a company and what's not. And so at that level, what I believe is the truly value-adding impact that an HR function can have, I think South Africa is well poised for all of us to add that value to the companies that we're working with.
Thank you all. This was a very good discussion. I enjoyed it. I have a question for Christian. Christian, you mentioned your experiences in South Africa and how you enjoy working with the people that you have here. So my question is, if or when you do return to the US, are you going to take your team with you?
I'll do my best, yeah. No, all I have to say is I think you all are not aware how lucky you have it. You live in one of the most beautiful and interesting countries in the world. So before you all line up to get on the plane to go back to the US with me, I'd suggest you visit first and just, consider that often the grass is greener, or you think the grass is greener, rather.
This is to the whole panel. Please share with us 2 or 3 key insights for individuals who go into a foreign country in a leadership role, where obviously, as we said, the regulatory environment is different, but also, certainly, as Pamela shared, the whole way of life is different. So the key insights on the importance of social and cultural intelligence. Some tips for success, please.
Social and
I have a quick thought on that, and let everyone else collect their thoughts. I think, one of the most important things is recognizing that while every country is different, and, you can paint with broad strokes about, what it means to be a South African, what it means to be an American, ultimately, a company and a country is a collection of individuals. But over the past years, I have learned that there are some human characteristics that unite all people. And if you can establish that rapport, it helps. So, sense of humor. I think it was Malisha who said a sense of humility. Yeah. A willingness to appreciate, that people exist in and outside of the office. And be a sponge. So, you've got there's a reason you're there, you have something to offer, but you need to spend a little bit of time figuring out what that is. So talk to people, learn from people, 2 parts listening for every part speaking. I'm still working on that one.
So basically, you're absolutely right, Christian. Don't go in there with I know it all attitude, because you do not know it all. So I think, but it's very important when you come into a foreign country at a leadership level, you really need to, identify what are the low-hanging fruits. What are those things that you can fix very quickly, that talk to your strengths, because then what that will do, it will show those around you that actually, she is capable of 1, 2, 3. She is capable of actually leading the team. And then also be curious, read as much as, because I cannot understate this. There's so much that you can learn from people, but a lot of knowledge, as we all know in this room, that is hidden in books. It's hidden in articles. It's hidden in data, as HR. So for you to speak with confidence and speak, from a place of knowing what you're talking about, you have to read a lot, So I think you're also understanding the language that is spoken in the host country where you are. In my case, I was in an Arabic country, So when you're dealing with government entities from an HR perspective, a lot of letters or information is written in Arabic. So what does that say? You really need to be very close to people who speak the language so that they trust you. They can translate those things into English, and you are able to actually do your work really in a way that shows people that you do have confidence. So you have to build relationships, and that takes a lot of self-awareness. You have to know who you are, and you have to teach people also about who you are. It's not only about them, but it's also about you, and having confidence that, hey, I'm an African and I'm here now, so let's do this. So it's very important, build relationships, be curious, read, and read a lot.
I've recently read a stat that 24% of our workforce in South Africa is female in senior management positions. So when I see, no offense to you, Christian, but when I see 2 women like you giving me your experience and hearing what you've done, I get super excited inside and I've got goosebumps all over. So for me as a woman, it's inspiring to see. That being said, Pamela mentioned mentoring as a key process, and I believe that firmly, that mentoring is such an important process. That being said, are you ladies, no offense Christian, open to mentoring some of the women here, and how would we connect with you if we wanted to?
I think, mentoring is something that's very close to my heart. And one of my first roles when I was 22 years old was to take care of bursary students. Until today, I call them my kids, and there was only a 3-year age gap. I believe that when you get a responsibility, it comes with certain expectations. And I believe in giving back. I also know that when I walk into a room, I represent every single woman that's not had that experience before. And I will do everything in my power to do justice to it. In terms of mentoring, I am currently mentoring people because to me that's the most rewarding part of my career. And let's hook up through LinkedIn as a start.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a noble cause, let me put it that way. It's so humbling because, you know, you think, how did I, in my journey, how did I even get to where I am today? Like, the answer is simple, really. Someone saw potential in you. They believed that you can do this, but you also had to put in the hard work that goes with it. And that mentoring relationship opens certain doors for you that would not have been possible otherwise. So that's why I say that it's part of giving back. It's a noble cause. It's very humbling because this is all that we have. We only have each other. So we need to be very, clear about, what is the role that we're going to play to groom the young ones, to take over us and even do even greater things, than us. So we still, all of us are on a journey. We're not finished yet. We're not even near finishing the journey, but, we've got other people that are looking up to us. Yes, I am mentoring people. I have some of my colleagues here, so they will tell you about my mentoring journey. It's something that I'm very vocal about. And I am in a male-dominated industry. We build cars. So, and it's very important that we continue to grow and develop women in the automotive sector. So as a result, we've started what we call a professional women's network with really a view of giving women a voice in the automotive industry and making sure that they are ahead, they develop, they grow to their best potential, so we can connect and take it from there. Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. I think it's also important to remember that mentoring, and I think you'll agree with me, is a two-way street.
Yeah.
You actually learn both ways,
Yes.
right?
And I wanted to add, even though
You're the wrong
I don't
gender,
have a
sorry.
female perspective, so my mentor, the person who mentors me, is a woman. So eventually you start paying it forward and getting men on the right track, I think.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you very much. That was great fun.